Alrighty. Let's see if we can get in here. Alrighty. Hey everybody, Steve here, and we're doing some live stuff now. So, what we're going to end up doing is see if we can check ourselves out on the video. So let's see if we can do this. Maybe. I don't know. It says we're live. I don't know, maybe we need to go back. Anyway, as I'm kind of going through all this, what we'll end up doing is we'll go back to our channel and we will check out our channel. And we should be able to go to live. And we should be able to watch ourselves live. But it's not letting us. Dang it. So, what are we going to do? But it played old videos, so we don't want that. Maybe the home? I don't know. No, it's not doing the home. And it's videos. What do we got going on? If I can view my channel. I don't know. Yesterday this was working. I'm not sure why. Maybe I need to close it and restart it. No, that's not doing anything. Let's try restarting it one more time. We'll see what happens. Anyway, with that being said, what we're doing is we are checking out our dry brushing. And let's do one more. My videos. Maybe I'll try that, see if that pops up. Live. Comes up. No, it's got the last one we did. It doesn't do this one. That is so odd. That is so odd. Just view the channel. I'm not sure why it's doing this. Okay. There it says. Okay, now we're coming up. So now we're live. So the other thing we can end up doing is checking out, make sure that the camera is pointed in the right direction. Okay, we don't need the audio, so we can take that off. And what this will enable us to do is to be able to see if my face is in frame. So we'll turn the camera, and there it is. I think I'm in frame. I think we're good. I guess we'll call it good with that. So what we'll end up doing, we'll set this over here. Move a bunch of stuff, and I don't know, it's almost like I need well, I do have a stand over here, excuse me, but this is kind of up and above, but at least I'll be able to see. So I got my little monitor up here so we can check out and see what's going on. Anyway, okay, so now that we went through all of that craziness, we're getting into dry brushing. Yesterday, I think it was, we ended up starting with the dry brushing stuff. I guess we could put the mic over here too, that would probably help. I don't have much of a mic cord. So we started dry brushing, and what I ended up doing is printing out, as you can see here, a FDM printed texture palette. So it's got a bunch of different textures on there. Basically what we end up doing is using this as a place to, once we load the brush with paint, we can get the majority of it off, and then we can go to the model and do the dry brushing. So this one turned out pretty good, and then I saw another one that caught my eye, and I ended up getting this one off of printables. So it's got like a bunch of barrels and shapes. There's more things that you can do, like hit the edges in practice. Then it also has like the rocks and like boards, and then just some kind of like ground type effect that we see there. The other thing we're going to end up doing, still one of the wife's makeup sponges, and what we end up doing is just putting enough water on that to, make it damp, but not like crazy wet, but just kind of damp like that, and so it's not crazy wet. And we're going to do a couple other things, but first what we're going to end up doing is taking a look at what we did yesterday. We started off with this character here. So this is the World of Warcraft guy, and what you can end up seeing here, I think this is centered about right where we're at, and we did the dry brushing on here. And even though we hit the highlights on this and we can see all the details, which is good, we still got some shadow areas and things like that, still wanted to get some highlights. So some more stuff on the edging and stuff like that. So when I was practicing yesterday off camera, came across some stuff that would be interesting. If you put too much paint on here and it just looks like you painted it, there is a way to rectify that. So one of the ways that you could end up doing is actually taking this, reprime it, and start from scratch, and you should be good to go. But if you don't want to do that, you could also kind of use a separate sponge. We've got a makeup sponge here, and what we can end up doing is we can load that up with some water, and these makeup sponges are pretty good because with this little tip, that what we can end up doing is going through and we can kind of remove some of the paint in those flatter areas. So you can see that we leave the highlighted areas, and like say right in here, in between these two spikes, if there's too much paint there, we can use this to kind of remove a little bit of that paint. And it works out pretty decent. It's not bad. So you just have to get it a little wet, and then you can remove a little bit of paint. You see it's more aggressive over here, but you can go through, and if you get too much paint in there, you can end up kind of using this to kind of brush off, some areas that, you probably don't want some paint. Or if there's too much paint, we can see that we can clean this up a little bit, and we can kind of fix whatever problems that we ended up having. So a makeup brush is a good way to kind of fix this up. Excuse me. The other thing we could end up doing is actually getting a brush and doing the same thing. We could wet the brush, kind of get most of the water off, and then we could go back and, like say in this area here, if we just saw that it had too much paint, we can just use the brush to kind of pull out some of that paint and almost kind of scrub it away. And of course this would probably have to be on a brush that you don't, it's not one of your prized brushes. And then you can see we got a little bit of that paint out of there. So yeah, you can salvage a lot of stuff by using a paintbrush and loading it up with a little bit of water, and then be able to take some of that paint off. Of course, this has been sitting for a day, so it's going to be a little bit harder to take that paint off, but I did the same thing over here, and yeah, it's just another way that we could end up doing that. So wash your brush and you're good to go. The other thing, after practicing with that guy, we did this guy here, and we can see that we got some edge highlighting on this, pretty much colored in the whole thing. But what I wanted to do is put more focus, more highlights on the ridges and things like this. So this made me reevaluate how I was doing my dry brushing. So even though this might look pretty good, there's still a lot of edges on here, like around this area here, to where, like on these edges of the armor, you probably want some more light hitting that, or some more white, and definitely on the tops of these edges here. So you really want that contrast, kind of like what we did up on here on these edges. And even that could use some more work on that. But after practicing on this, what I ended up doing off camera was doing this guy here. So now he came out pretty darn good. So we can see that, you know, we didn't do too crazy. Of course, there's a lot more finer details on this. You know, we have the netting and stuff like that, so we've got raised areas that will definitely grab the paint more. But we see that this one has definitely create more contrast, and we hit those highlighted areas. And how I did this was being careful as to how close I was towards the model with the brush. So in other words, if I've got the dry brush here, instead of kind of like mashing it in like I did with, you know, like this one here, and just really kind of putting a lot of the pressure on there, what I ended up doing is just backing off and getting minimal amount of distance on the model and just hitting the edges. So in other words, just kind of hitting the edges there, and just being cognizant that I'm not like pressing the brush so it's like that. So in other words, I'm really just being focused on just hitting the edges like that, and that's how we're able to get that. So this came out really good. I'm really happy with the results on this, and especially on the head, we've got a lot of texture there, and of course on all the excuse me, on all the tips around here, around his head, that turned out really good. So we can see a big difference. But I think part of it has to do with the model. But with that, how close you put your dry brush onto the model will make a big difference as well. So if I could go back, like with this guy, what I would probably end up doing is just barely touching, you know, the edges of stuff, so we can get more defined highlights around the raised areas. And that's exactly what I did with this one here. So yeah, this turned out really good. And then there's also different techniques. Instead of just going back and forth, you can end up going in a circle, or you can go up and down, or a combination. It kind of depends on the model and how you're going to hit this. So think of it as light is coming down, you want to hit those areas that you want that dry brushing. Of course, you're going to hit all these raised areas here, but put more focus on the really big stuff. So on these big spikes and stuff like this, and on his teeth, things like that, you can hit these areas with more, kind of like what we ended up here, and that gives more definition. So it gives a greater highlight, I guess you could say. So yeah, that worked out really good. Now the other thing is with sponges, because before we just added water and, you know, dabbed our brush in there, and then we just kind of got the excess, and then we went towards and did our model. The other thing we could end up doing, well, I've got this guy here. I've got the Logan, the Wolverine guy. This model is one of the first few models that I ended up doing, and it came out pretty good. It's still got some cracking and stuff like that. Didn't really cure this as much as I should have, so yeah, it's got a bunch of cracks, you can see that. So I was just kind of relegated to, well, he's just going to be all cracked up, and that's all there is. So, but I think we can still practice with this guy, because he's still got some good areas. Of course, this white is going to hit all of these cracks and everything. So what we'll end up doing is we'll just jump right into this. Again, we're going to be using some matte white, so we'll mix that up a little bit. And Logan has fell off the shelf a few times, and so that's why he's only got his middle finger out there. And even that's with UV resin glue to put that back on. Moving stuff around. Things just didn't work out for Logan. So we'll just go back and we'll just throw some paint on there. Add a bit of water. I think that should work. And what we'll end up doing is we'll mix up our paint. I don't know what the ratio is for this. But we'll see. Maybe I need to watch some more videos and figure out what is the exact ratio for water to paint and all of this stuff. Okay, so we've got this going on, and this is another technique that I ended up seeing online, is that you can do the dry brush with your palette, you can do your dry brush with your paper towel to get it clean. Now there's dry brushing with a damp sponge, so yeah, that's going to be kind of interesting. And the whole idea is to just get a little bit of the bristles. I guess it's not getting them wet, but it's just getting it barely damp. And so we're going to try this out and see what happens. So I'll just dab that in there, kind of get the excess, and then we can end up seeing people use the sponge to go back and forth. We're just going to end up using our palette, and we could practice on some of the things here. But pretty much when you don't see any paint coming off, what we can end up doing is hitting our model, and we should have, yep, we got some paint coming off of there. We can do our dry brushing. So I don't know if it's better to do it dry. Excuse me, I don't know if it's better to do a dry brush or use the sponge. It's kind of hard with the pink, but let's see, we can end up. See, we're starting to get that in there. But there's different techniques, obviously, and some are better than others for certain applications. So, you know, that comes into play. I like the palette because then you can actually see how much paint you got on your brush, and so you can kind of gauge, okay, I think we're good enough there. So I'm not sure which one is better. I don't know if you can say one is better than the other. That's just kind of, I'm not sure. I don't know, maybe I need to dampen the sponge a little bit more. Let's see if we can hit the supposedly with the damp sponge, you can basically kind of reactivate a little bit of the paint. So I'm going real sparingly on this. So it talks about doing that a couple of times. I don't know. Maybe the sponge needs to be more wet, maybe. And just kind of we're going to try some other techniques, some other stuff. Because like the makeup sponge that we have here, we can try that, a little cutout sponge there. And I think we'll just leave a little bit more on the brush. And then we'll just kind of hit get some more contrast on the edges. I'm just going really light. Probably almost too light. Let's build this up a little bit. So there we can do a little bit more. That's just really drying out quick. I'm thinking maybe that sponge needs to be damper. Could end up just kind of layering this. Get the eyebrows. Again, the raised areas, I don't want to press this in too much. I think I need to put this camera like right in front. So I got to come up with a mounting thing so that way it's here because I'm kind of moving back and forth. Or I could end up kind of moving it this way. Let's see how that works. So there we're getting a little bit more on the higher areas. Like on the edges of the jacket. Kind of so that looks a little bit better. So we got some little bit of color in there, so that's a lot better. And again, try to get more on the raised areas, which would be his eyebrows, nose, chin, some of the cheeks. And with that, what it might have to end up doing is getting a smaller brush, which I actually do have smaller, to hit up those areas. So yeah, you might need to get a smaller brush. These brushes, I think, were all that I end up getting were all makeup brushes, if I'm not mistaken. So they even have one that is even really super tiny that you could end up for smaller models, or could be used on smaller models. So let's see if we continue on with this. It's going to be really light. I'm going to water that down a bit much. Well, that looks okay. So, yeah, dry brushing just comes down to you got to practice dry brushing. To get better, that's what you have to end up doing. So that, maybe we just put a little bit more water on there. Okay. I think it's working a little bit. Dab our brush in there. Hit it up on the then we can kind of go back and we can kind of hit some of these raised areas. So now you can really start to see the cracks, because this wasn't fully cured, and then I ended up painting it way too early. I should have let it set for a while, cure it a lot better than what I did. But it is what it is. That reactivated it pretty decent. But we're still gonna need more paint. So yeah, it just comes down to just practicing more. I knew this guy was going to be a little rough. Yeah, these cracks are just going to come out crazy looking. Again, we just want to try to kind of hit the seams. Raised areas. That we can see on there. Activate that. You can see how it brings that paint back to life. So supposedly, man, there's a lot of cracks in that guy. Man, that's crazy. The other thing we can end up doing that I saw is people end up using like this makeup brush. And so we're going to dive into this and see how that works. And we're going to try doing it on here, on his singular, the FU finger. And what we'll end up doing is we'll just kind of see that. And this we can get a more, you can see that, we can get more control on the edging. Oh, okay. See how we're getting that? And you could even go through and clean that up a little bit, but that's a lot of control that you can do with this. So I like that. And depending on the angle that you're at, we can see that we can get some pretty good highlights on there. Nice. So that's interesting. Interesting. So we can see we got some edging on here. That looks like it could be pretty good for smaller pieces or smaller things that you're trying to get an edge highlight on. So for example, on his jacket here with the big brush, that could be kind of interesting. But with this, you can end up see if how this can work. Need some more paint on there. It's amazing how different materials can be. There we go. And we can also use the same sponge for like cleaning up the areas. Interesting. Of course, this has just got so many cracks, but we can see how we get along that edge there with this. And then if we get too much, we can always just kind of go through a little bit of clean that up a little bit. Interesting. Too much. All right. We kind of use it as a almost like a pointed brush, how we can get some of that. Some of those raised areas and create some depth and still create a nice line of, yeah, on those edges. So kind of like that. And just kind of blend that in there. We got a little bit too much there, so we're going to see if we can fix this. Get a little bit of water on our brush and see if we can salvage that. Yeah, a little bit. So yeah, you can paint a little bit of that away, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, we can fix some stuff with this. Not bad. Let's go back to our big brush. Paint dries out quick, that's for sure. So, despite all the cracks and crevices and the horribly cured model, still do some edging, need some stuff on the hand. So yeah, then we could even probably do a little bit under his neck. That's just totally black, and we'll need some type of color in there. So yeah, so not bad. Again, it's just more practice, more practice. Look at how that cracking in there is terrible. That is just horrendous. And of course, dry brushing is just going to bring all of that out. But it gives them a little bit more character, that's for sure. And see if we can activate this a little bit more. Dry brush powers activate. So yeah, here he is. So not too bad. And again, it's just going to come down to practicing. You know, practicing on the techniques, practicing on, you know, you can go in circles, you go left, right, up or down. Kind of depends on what you're doing. So yeah. But overall, I would say this is a pretty good practice session, and especially of going when we have something like that, and where we've got a little bit of depth, and then we've got a lot more details, so that'll come out really good. But really took the time to just get the highlights on this guy, on the Predator guy, and the edges, because of the way the details are and the netting. This turned out really, really nice. So yeah, just kind of some cool stuff that you can do. So yeah, it ends up, I think it turned out good. I don't even know if I'll paint this guy. I probably will, but I don't know. We'll see. We will see. We got a little bit of paint left. All that's pretty much dried. Got a little bit of detail in there. It's not too bad. Just, that is what it is. So we've got our different models there, and we got a lot of different results, but I think overall these came out pretty good. Of course, the model is going to make a difference. The more details that you have on your model, kind of like with the orc guy that we got here, that turned out really good because there are a lot of details. But I think we could go through and we could hit some more highlights to create some more contrast on him, especially on his hair, the spikes and things that are, the edges here, that will create more depth. But still, he turned out pretty good. And then I think my favorite is going to be the Predator guy. The Predator guy turns out really, really nice, as we can see there. So that just came out really, really well. And so painting this is going to be interesting. And I did order some speed paints. So those are en route. They're on a slow boat from China or wherever it comes from to Korea. And then, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how these all come out. So besides the fact that this was horribly not cured as well as it should have been, I mean, the cracking, that is just crazy. It is just an insane amount of cracking. So that's why I never really did anything with him, and he just kind of just sat up there by himself. And yeah, I was like, I almost was never going to paint him. So kind of glad I got a chance to do some stuff to him. But yeah, fun stuff. Probably get some on the jacket, but I'll probably just put him up on the shelf like this. Should we do this guy? This guy's got a ton of details, and I think we could do him. Might as well. You know what I'm going to end up doing here? So I'm going to put Wolverine back on his shelf where he was over here. I'll use this sticky putty stuff. Put it on the base, so I kept knocking him over, and that's why he kept losing his claws and losing his claws. His claws would get broken, and I put him back and then fall over again because it's not the flattest base there is, and it's coming apart. So I'll just get some of this here. And what I ended up doing is just kind of putting it on the base here, and then that way he will have some adhesive to keep this on the shelf. And so if the shelf gets bumped a little bit, it wasn't perfectly flat on the bottom either, so that caused a lot of problems. But with this, we put him on there and he will be good to go. That looks a lot better. Definitely a lot better up on the shelf. Predator guy, we'll move him over there. Lord of the Rings guy, World of Warcraft guy. And now, this was another resin print from a long, long time ago. I forget the character's name. I don't know if he's Titus or whatever he is. A ton of details on this. So this should be a pretty good dry brush as well. But with all of the small areas, maybe that's where we come into where we use a smaller brush. So let's see if we can get this up to the camera and you can take a look at him. I know it's just a big black mass. So, but he's going to have a lot of details on there, and I think that'll really make this thing pop. But it's also small. So yeah, let's get to it. Let's get on it. And we can see that our brush isn't really clogged up, so that's nice. So, mix up some paint real quick, and we'll see how this guy turns out. And this isn't my normal streaming time. Usually I stream in the morning, but it's like 8:30, 8:34 at night here in Korea on the 1st. And usually I stream in the morning, so get more people that way. So it's afternoon or evening, whatever it is in the United States. So I really need to get one of those palettes that has those little circle areas that you can mix paint and do that. But until then, we just use the plastic cup. I think we can do the big one. So with that, do that. And let us begin. Let's do the back here. Just kind of hit the So yeah, that's coming out already. starting to see some details. Coming out good, not bad. yeah, it's turned out pretty good. Definitely a lot more details, that's for sure. So yeah, it's turned out pretty good. Definitely a lot better. Way more details, that's for sure. Yeah, it's just going to take more practice and doing this over and over and over. And I can't wait for the speed paints to come in, because that should be, maybe that was a lot. But yeah, really looking forward to those speed paints coming in. Let's see how that goes. So yeah, it's got a lot more detail on them than I first thought. Yeah, this is just begging, and so are all the other ones. They are just begging for speed paints, aren't they? Those are just going to look really good. So but just a little bit goes a long way, as we can like see on these rocks. That really comes out nice. We got just barely enough to get that section there. I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's going to be pushing it. Yeah, get a little bit of that in there. See if we can reactivate it a little bit. Yeah. It's pretty good. So yeah, pretty good stuff there. Definitely brought out some more detail work, that's for sure. So definitely a lot better than the big black mass that he was before. So yeah. Squeeze a little bit more out of that. Get some more highlights on his. I think that's gonna be good. Not bad. So there it is. So we ended up doing some more dry brushing practice, and we can see that a little bit goes a long way, and it produces some really good results. We could probably even go in with a smaller brush and, you know, kind of get some more detailed areas if we wanted to do like individual highlights, try to get more. It actually should be cut down, I think, a little bit more, but we could get more edge highlighting on this to really get some contrast on like the peaks of things, and that would look really good. But I mean, that's a hell of a lot better than what it was before, as being a big black mass of stuff. So yeah, that's what we got going on. So there it is. We did a number of different dry brushing techniques. We ended up using the regular brush. We used this little sponge thing that we got going on. I'm not sure how I feel about that yet. I don't know. Might be something that could be worth doing. You know, we get a little bit more on there. Yeah, I think we're pretty much done with that. The other thing we ended up doing is using this makeup brush here to be able to get some edge highlighting. I'm not sure how I feel about this yet, but that'll be, you know, we can just keep practicing with that, and we'll see how that goes. But that's another tool in the toolbox you can use. So I mean, there's always that. You might have a piece where you need to get some really pointed, because this is pointed, some really pointed areas in which you could do some dry brushing and some edge highlighting, so to speak. So this is a possible thing. And then of course, if you're cheap, you can always just use some foam. This was just foam out of some packing material, and if you wanted to do something like, if you want to do some texture work, This is mostly what I've used this for. Let's get a little bit. Let's get something besides white. How about some, maybe like, I want like a bronze. This will be interesting. Weapons bronze. I don't know how this is going to work out. That definitely needs some mixing. That has been sitting for quite some time. So we've got the two different types. We have the airbrush paints that we have here, which are actually pretty nice for painting with brushes because it's like they're already diluted, as opposed to the regular army paints, which you might have to dilute that a little bit and definitely get the shake thing going on. But let me show you with that little sponge, the cutout from the packing material, on what I would end up using that for. Now I've done it on some models. It looks kind of cool. And so you could also do your edge highlighting or your dry brushing with different colors, which is something that's interesting. So yeah. So let's just go ahead and we'll just put some color on there, like so. I was like trying to clean out my, there's a bunch of stuff in there. I always try to keep these clean. There's a bunch of just boogers in there. Something like maybe might have something that works. One of Logan's claws, but it's so brittle that's not going to work. I wonder if I can, what else do I have that's long and pointy? Seriously, usually I got like paper clips or whatever. Maybe an Allen key. Can we get that out of there? There we go. I was buggering up that whole thing in there. Oh, here's the other thing I like about dropper bottles. If you do that, your paint doesn't spill out. So I transferred all of my Citadel paints, because that was the first set of paints that I get, was a Barney Basic set, and I put them all into dropper bottles. And so that way, if the paint pot drops or falls over, I don't have to worry about losing all my paint. So I highly recommend that. Okay, so with that, let's see how we can do just and let's see what we can end up doing on how this looks for the color. Let's do this guy here. So again, kind of the typical dry brushing. And this can add a little bit of a color element to that, which that could be pretty good. So you get a little bit of a different color there. So if you kind of wanted like a bronze type of thing going on, you kind of slide that in there. So we get some, a little bit of a different color scheme on that. That's kind of cool. So that's kind of an interesting thing. The other thing I'd end up doing is with this little bit of foam, is I kind of just cut it a little bit so it's kind of a pointy end. And what I would end up doing is using this for some texture, so I could blot this on. So we could do something like that. I wanted to add some more depth. So you can see how that adds some depth to that as well, and just little, nothing crazy, but it's enough to where it would make this go from, you know, just kind of boring and one color to now you've got some other colors in there. So you could have some different effects on those. And this is kind of good for the grimdark stuff too, because you can kind of weather and battle-worn stuff. You put some wear marks, but you can see how that's turning out. And that adds a lot more character to this. Doesn't that look a lot better? So yeah, it's just kind of wild in what you can end up doing, and even with just something as simple as a little piece of packing foam from something that I bought. I was like, hey. And then we can just end up, again, just kind of doing some edging on here. To kind of give it a little different effect. So that turns out kind of cool. So we've got kind of that effect there. And it adds a little bit more detail, a little bit more depth. And it's just a little foam thing. You know, just putting on some pieces, and not really a big plan on like where to do it, but just kind of some random spots on there. And we can end up with a pretty decent looking base that otherwise would just be meh. So yeah, a lot of different things. And that's the kind of crazy thing. Imagine doing, I guess you could call this dry brushing or texturing with just these little things here, especially with this. Start getting into, you know, how you have your three colors. You know, you have a dark color, a medium color, and then a light color. Go your dark, and then do your medium, and then your highlights, and then the same thing with this, and kind of doing this with your model. Man, you can imagine the effect it would have. And again, just look at that, on how that shines and how that turns out. That looks really, really good. So I'm trying to look in the camera and see how this looks on it. So it takes a while because there's some lag. Oh yeah, it turns out pretty good. That is not bad. Not bad at all. I like that. So with this, you could do like what we ended up with the metal pieces here. And then for the piece up here, you could put your metallics in here, like your silver, and like on, do some edging on this. You could probably do it with this as well, but do some silver edging on this. You could really get some good contrast between something, the base, the breastplate, the top, his skin, the chains, all of that. Imagine if you took the different color schemes, the dark, the medium, and the highlights, and incorporated all that into everything that you did. Man, you'd have a pretty awesome piece. So, yeah, very, very interesting. Let's try some of this on this here, on his big giant axe. And we'll just kind of see what we get on that. And then my question is, how would this look like with speed painting on top of this, and how that would look? I mean, I bet that would look kind of cool. It's starting to dry out now. And then you could end up just kind of doing basically kind of like some edging on there to try to get some, oh yeah, that would look good. Try to mimic kind of like rust or something like that. So look how that turned out. And the randomness of, just the little sponge. That turns out pretty good. That is not bad at all. So, yeah, pretty cool stuff. Just amazing on what you could end up doing just with just a little bit of color on here. Of course, now everything's starting to dry, but kind of get the idea of being able to get some different colors in there. And again, add some more contrast. Instead of just having one solid color of dry brushing, you could add some of this, and then, yeah, the speed paint. If you added the speed paint on top of this stuff, that would be interesting to take a look at. But even like with this, that just creates more depth and more character. So yeah, that looks really good. I like that. So I think that's gonna be it. So, yeah, that's what we got going on. Some interesting stuff as far as practicing dry brushing. And again, I've noticed I've gotten better practicing with different distances, putting the brush really full on there or having it just get the tips and the highlights and things like that. Definitely a lot of cool stuff to learn. So, yeah. Definitely some skill involved in dry brushing. So with that, the other skill that comes into play is cleaning your dry brush. So I've had a number of people say that you could use isopropyl alcohol and just get enough so the alcohol gets into where the paint but not into the ferrule. I also have some some soap, brush cleaner, and preserver. So I'll be using this and some water to clean my brushes out, which should do pretty well. So we got that one. That one's pretty decent. But we'll clean these up and we'll pretty much call this good. And yeah, that looks nice. I'll just kind of form this back into a tip. I'll let that dry. And do a little bit of water in that. And then we'll just get it. Clean this until we don't get any more color. We can, so that cleaned it up pretty good. Nice. So yeah, nothing really crazy. Again, just kind of the dry brushing stuff and checking out how that works. Practicing, getting a little bit better. We added a little bit of color, some texturing, using our little tiny sponge. We did our little makeup sponge. I don't know if I like the makeup sponge so much with this. And as far as this sponge here, you can do some reactivating, so you could make your dry brush paint last a little bit longer, but maybe just 1 or 2 times. But it does come out thick, so keep that in mind. At least that's what I've had happen to me. So practice on your pile of shame, and if it doesn't come out good, then you can always just prime it black again and go back to airbrushing or dry brushing again. So yeah, that's what we got going on. So with that being said, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that, as I'm continuing to learn resin printing and miniature painting and dry brushing and all of these things, and FDM printing, and doing more of that. And yeah, building a cosplay, doing all that. Retired in Korea, so if you got questions about that, that's kind of interesting. I got kind of a mishmash of different videos on my channel, but yeah, this is part of it too. This is the stuff that I like. I like the building, I like the doing. I like it to when I can get a figure, kind of like, here's a couple of guys that I'm painting, and these guys turned out pretty good, but they're just so small and there's so many details, and so it's taken me forever to get these guys done. But with the speed paints, that would be interesting to see how something like these figures would do in speed painting. And again, the speed painting stuff just seems kind of cool. I've been watching more videos on it, and it ends up that they just turn out really, really nice. And this, I use like the magnifying glasses on here to try to get everything. But these guys turned out good, and I'm not even done with them yet. So yeah, a lot of good stuff on there. A lot of good stuff. So that's what we have. Yeah, like and subscribe to the channel. I would really appreciate that. If you want to do me a solid, you could buy me a coffee. There's a link in the description box down below if you learned anything. If there's any tips, tricks, or playlists or videos, send those to me at the email address, officialthevariedlife@gmail.com. And what we can end up doing is I check my email. I'm very religious about checking my email. Might be 1 or 2 days, but I answer everybody. So with that, you can get in touch with me that way. And again, anything that can make me a better hobbyist, I guess you could say, since I'm the retired hobby tech guy, retired, and now I'm a hobby guy and I'm a tech guy. So anything to make me better would be appreciated. So with that, we're going to go ahead and let you all go. I'm going to get up and go to the computer and shut this off. So we'll see you on the next video. All right, peace. Maybe we'll even throw the outro thing on there a little bit. I don't know. Let's see. And the outro would be, oh, there's Veritas accents. The accents look really nice. Yeah, that turned out really good. I didn't see, I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't pay attention to the comments. Oh, and Ferrith has got a lot of accents look nice. Texturing, I use crumpled up newspaper, works pretty well. So, ooh, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. I like that. Yeah, we'll have to try that. And then, yeah, the little guys turned out really good. They're really frustrating to do because of all the details. But, yeah, cool stuff. So, anyway, yeah. All right, Verithus. All right, we got to go, so we'll let you all go. And I also have some more cameras coming in so that I can set this up. So I have enough cameras for the computer desk, the paint station, and all of that, and get coverage everywhere. So again, I appreciate that, everybody who's watching. And we're going to sign off and see you on the next video. Yeah. All good. Just had breakfast, now gym time. Have a good evening. Yeah, have a good gym. I hit the workout today, chest and back, so go kill it yourself. Everybody else, we will see you on the next video. All right? Peace.